Hi, I'm Zach Murdoch, local government reporter here at the Herald-Tribune, and welcome to our voter's guide for the 2017 Sarasota City Commission candidates race. I'm here with the only incumbent in the race, Susan Chapman. Thank you for joining us. And
thank you.
I'd like to just launch straight into a question because we've talked a bit about this before. You're the only incumbent, and when you chose to run again, you addressed this tug of war, I suppose, between a lot of the criticism that you faced as a commissioner and your desire to run again. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about fighting through some of those things and deciding to do this.
Well, we just have two new commissioners who really hadn't had a lot of city experience before they were elected. And then we had one more experienced commissioner, and that's Mayor Shaw. And when Commissioner Atwell chose not to run, there was a large loss of historical memory about the policies that had occurred before. And certainly I'm currently the only person who's been on the planning board who serves on the commission. So it was a great deal of commitment from having lived in the city since 1989.
Mm-hmm. And you have made no bones about it, but whether it's the Sunshine lawsuit or the recent comments about ambulances, you have battled a lot of kind of backlash to some of the things you've talked about. How did that factor into the decision?
Well, the Herald-Tribune has helped a lot with that, especially the ambulance issue. And what an interesting thing about the ambulance issue, when I met with the union, their real issue was about restoring post-employee benefits and dependent coverage, not anything about whether I made a snarky comment about ambulances.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, let's pivot to another big topic then that we've addressed at a lot of the recent candidate forums, and that's about homelessness. And over the past year, the city and county and nonprofits have all made a lot of progress moving hundreds of people off the streets and into housing, but there's still a bit of a struggle to try to get everyone on the same page rowing in the same direction. And I wonder, from your perspective, how does the city help elevate that and push it to the next level, and what's the city's role in that?
Well, the city has a great role in it, and we have a good plan. And I'm very proud and honored that I was the only one talking about evidence-based solutions of housing first and permanent supportive housing. And then over the years, everybody has gotten on board with that policy. What I would like to do is the next step, which is a collective impact model. Several jurisdictions, including Orlando, have made great progress using the Stanford collective impact model. And what that really is that everybody agrees that there's one methodology that works, and that's housing, and then you agree on how to test whether it's successful or not. One of the things we do in government a lot is we have programs that are supposed to be successful, and then we don't go back and test to see if they're really effective. So one of the issues about the Stanford Collective Impact Model is that everybody agrees on what the methodology that everyone in the community is going to use, and then they agree how we're going to test it to see if it's effective.
Mm-hmm. And how would that apply here?
Well, one of the things they have in Orlando is that the faith community is on the same page as the Chamber of Commerce, which is on the same page with both the city and county governments, the hospital, all of the different factors, all of the different people and providers of services for individuals experiencing homelessness. They all get together and they say, this is the direction we're going to go. And then they say, this is how we're going to test if this direction is effective. So instead of feeding people on the streets, the faith community helps to provide wraparound services. Instead of $6 million of emergency room services, the hospital agrees this is how we're going to keep people out of the hospital with wraparound services.
And one more on that note is the question of this long debate about emergency services, shelter type services as a part of the spectrum to housing. Where does that play into the model that you're talking about?
Well, right now, the city of Sarasota is the largest emergency provider of services of emergency housing services. But what we would be doing is migrating away from shelter services more toward placing people in housing as quickly as possible and using the money that we save to create housing.
Well, let's turn to another big topic, which is downtown development. And I know you're very keen on this issue, and I have a very specific question about this billion-dollar boom that has happened downtown and all the cranes going up. The question is not whether it's good or bad for the city necessarily, because it's happening. The question is how does the city commission and city leaders balance the new development with this kind of idyllic, historic idea of Sarasota as a small town?
Well, I think it's the issue of who dominates, the human or the building. And one of the things that's happened when we got rid of our planning director, when we went through the recession, is that we kind of lost the focus of the human scale and planning for the future. For example, now we have buildings right up next to the sidewalk, and we may need wider sidewalks, and we can't do it. We have roads that are narrow, and we may want to use multimodal transportation that includes bicycle paths, and we don't have the space to do it. So those are things that make a community more livable that the dated part of the Dewani plan are preventing us from doing.
So how do you turn that forward and address those issues now that those buildings exist?
Well, that's a really difficult problem because we have some buildings that are on super blocks that have damaged our transportation grid, and we're going to have to go back and problem solve with those. We have some buildings that the public almost uniformly dislikes, and so we're going to have to go back and figure out how can we mitigate what has happened. Now, just last week, they interviewed 4 candidates or finalists for the planning director. All of them were very qualified. It'll be interesting to see when we get a new planning director how that person is going to help us fix this problem.
So is Sarasota in danger of losing its small town identity in favor of 18 stories and tall buildings?
I think that we're in danger of losing our livability identity. I think we've always had an identity where we accept a lot of new people. And so the real issue is not small town versus large town. The real issue is, do the buildings impose themselves on the public realm? Do the buildings have human scale? There are actual studies that say 6:1 is a comfortable human scale. And some of these buildings are just overwhelming of the streetscape.
Well, I appreciate you stopping by and letting us chat with you. That's all I had. Thank you again, Incumbent Commissioner Susan Chapman, and the election is March 14th.